Buyers obsessed with a bargain. Let's talk about paying $10,000 for the right property, or save $10,000 on the wrong property. Good morning.
The bargain hunter. Good morning, Billy. How are you?
Bargain hunter. Yeah, good. I'm a bargain hunter, but I feel like sometimes you can get it wrong.
Yeah. Listen, let's be real. Everyone loves a bargain and everyone likes to feel as though they've had a win. You know, that's the truth. But at what cost? And it's not like you're out there negotiating on a pair of shoes, you're buying a property. So you really want to make sure that you get it right. And we see some doozies. We really do, where buyers will walk away literally over. And listen, it's funny. In real estate, we talk about, thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And sometimes people lose sight as to exactly how much money 1,000 is or 2,000 is. In property negotiations, it literally, we've seen buyers lose out over $1,000 deal.
Yeah. It's, look, I understand everyone's got their budget as well. And, everyone sort of feels like they've already increased beyond their budget, and so then it becomes a bit of a stretch, and it all does that. But yeah, we're going to talk about this morning what does it actually look like to become obsessed with a bargain, and who comes away with that feeling of winning the negotiation. It's certainly very side of the big picture.
Yeah. But here's the thing: what's worth more, paying $10,000 more than you wanted for the right property, or saving $10,000 on the wrong one?
Yeah, so well said.
Right? That's the truth. Because if you save $10,000 let me start that again. If you save $10,000 but you buy the wrong property, we haven't really saved anything at all. And I've seen this happen where there's a real thing, guys, called buyer's remorse. And I've dealt with these buyers myself, Billy, where they've purchased a property. It wasn't really the one that they wanted, but that vendor took their offer. And then they've got buyer's remorse. They'll call up after a year and they're like, actually, we've made a mistake. We bought the wrong property. In hindsight, I met a lady actually the other day at an open home on Saturday, and she bought this phenomenal 1-bedroom apartment with this beautiful big terrace. And she's asked me to come and do an appraisal on her property. And when I looked it up on Cotality, I'm like, oh, you haven't even been there for a year. She's like, I know, because the grandson comes over to stay and I don't have a bedroom. And really, I should have bought the 2-bedder. Buyer's remorse. It's a costly exercise.
Well, it is, because you then go through these changeover costs and, you're sort of back to square one. So it is. But what I really encourage buyers to do when they're looking at negotiating a deal overall is like work out aside from price. Lee Woodward came in and did some great training with us last Tuesday, and he did one of these ones. It was like when the president walks in. Do one of these ones. Put price aside, and let's look at what else is negotiable here, because the terms make a big part of it as well. And if you're a buyer but you need to sell your property as well, then terms are also really important to you. And I guess hard to put a number on it, but there is a number on it as to what that's worth. So if you can negotiate with the vendor and try and match their terms to make it appealing, if you're not quite there on price, goes a long way. And vice versa, if you need particular terms to make it work for you, then that's really worth considering.
Yeah. And look, I had a situation last Friday, Billy, where a buyer had called me early in the morning and said, look, we've got a budget of X. This is the sort of property that we want to buy. It was a little 2-bedroom, very entry-level apartment in DY. And they said, look, we understand that that's probably not going to buy the property. And I said, well, hang on, what are your terms? Because exactly what you just said, Billy, The offer makes up one piece of the puzzle, but their terms were so good. They were so compelling for the vendor that the vendor actually ended up accepting their offer. And by Friday evening, it had exchanged unconditionally. So
Yeah.
they had offered less than what the vendor was hoping to achieve. However, it was a 2-week settlement and it was unconditional and they could exchange that day. So the terms were so great. Probably the biggest mistake that I see that takes place in any market with buyers is they don't do anything and then they call up and they're like, oh, I would have paid that. I can't believe it sold for that price. I would have bought it at that. And it's like, well, guys, you've got zero chance if you don't make any offer whatsoever.
Yeah.
So go around, put offers in on properties. A lot of people don't realize that putting an offer in on a property does not commit you in New South Wales. It does not commit you to buying the property. The only time that you are ever committed is when you have exchanged on that property. So you literally could walk around on a Saturday and you could put offers in on all the properties that you see that you like, and you can literally see what sticks. But definitely try and firm it up with your terms and conditions because that plays a huge part in it. The other big mistake that I see buyers make is, as an example, if we're guiding on a property $1 million and they come in with their offer at $700,000, which is way, way below a guide. Not only is it going to annoy a real estate agent, but you're also going to offside the vendor because the vendor thinks there's absolutely no sincerity there. And I've had plenty of vendors that have said, don't even care what their offer comes up to. I am not dealing with that buyer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, positioning yourself in a negotiation, and we saw this even more importantly when the market was quite competitive towards the end of last year. At any one time, there may be a vendor choosing between 2 or 3 offers, and they could be almost identical in price and terms. So positioning yourself as a buyer is really important. I think we've lost a bit of that in the last 6 months just because it feels like all the time in the world. It feels like there's no one else in the negotiation, but that can quite quickly change in a private treaty setting. So, yeah,
really,
really,
definitely. And that's the other thing. Like, Mark and I were talking about it last night on our Monday night news. Be careful that the data that you're looking at is not skewed, because I know the news is very good at reporting the auction clearance rates, but that's kind of about it. And when we actually drew down and had a look at how many properties in Sydney were going to auction, it was actually ridiculous. It was sitting at circa 80, but yet all the statistics are based around those auction clearance rates. We're talking about such a minute part of the property transaction market. So just be careful that that data is accurate. And, certainly on the northern beaches, we've seen prices come down approximately 10%, depending on the property and the area. But, we're not seeing absolute bargains. Like, you think about it, Billy, that all the transactions that have taken place in our office in the last, let's call it 3 or 4 months since the budget, we have not, literally, there hasn't been one single sale where we've gone, oh my God, that sold so cheaply.
yeah. I mean, they've been fair price for both vendor and buyer. I really believe that. And sometimes a buyer feels like they're doing the wrong thing bidding against themselves. But if it's in the pursuit of actually bidding against the vendor, not another buyer, but bidding against the vendor and securing the property, that's the best kind of negotiation you could ask for. I was overhearing a deal put together yesterday, and I think there was about 50,000 between the buyer and the vendor, and slowly the buyer sort of crept up, and I think the vendor came down, sort of meet them halfway. But that's the best negotiation you could ask for. Don't feel like you've overpaid because you're sort of against yourself. When it's in the pursuit of doing a deal, that's where some people can really easily go, you know what? They can come and meet me at my number, and that's a bargain. Or, in this case, I think the deal was struck and it was fair, very fair.
Yeah, that's right. No, we are seeing everything is selling at market price at the moment. Certainly there's no records being broken, but there's also no fire sales to be found either, not in our area. I don't know what other areas look like across New South Wales and even across Australia, but the Northern Beaches is quite a resilient market, and we're definitely seeing things are selling at that market price. But the truth is, like, probably one of the biggest tips I can give is just don't let a few thousand, 10,000, whatever it might be, stand in the way of that property purchase if you really, really do want that property. Because people, when they're negotiating, they just think about that moment, and many buyers feel as though they overpaid by that $10,000. But guys, if you amortize out how long you're going to be living in that property for, what is that? Is that going to be 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? The extra $10,000 that you may have paid to secure that property, when you amortize it out, is really not a huge amount of money to get the property that you want, as opposed to buying a property that you just didn't want, but the price was right. And then, you ended up like this lovely lady that I met on Saturday who's got serious buyer's remorse. So, you've got to think about it logically. Again, let's draw back to Mr. Lee Woodward. Often you cannot read the label from inside the jar. Sometimes you've actually got to take yourself out of the jar so you can actually have a good look at really what is going to be crystal clear for you, reading that label from outside the jar. So just take a moment when you're negotiating. We see people get really wound up with it all.
And you can close the gap with terms and positioning yourself as the right buyer. So, look, if you want help with that, that's where you need an agent on your side if you've not done this before. We're not here to work against you, here to bring it all together.
100%. And sometimes, guys, when there's that gap there of, let's call it $10,000, because it's often the pointy end of the negotiation where things can fall apart. If you're sort of circa 10,000, you might even just increase a little bit just so that vendor can see that you're playing bat and ball with them. And, we've seen it many times, Billy, where a vendor's turned around and said, okay, you know what, I'm going to meet them halfway. And then very quickly you've got a deal done. So, coming up a little bit on your offer, as I said, just to show that there's, that you're really doing your very, very best. Hey, I'll tell you guys another really good tip just before we wind up. And this has happened plenty of times where a purchaser has actually written a note to a vendor and let them in a little bit about their story. Seriously, there's been times where I've had higher offers on the table and vendors have opted to go with the young family because they love the story that came behind it. That's another really great tip.
And that's all in positioning, so if it's a vacant property, you can close the gap by shortening a settlement. There's a couple of weeks less on the mortgage for the vendor. These are all the little tips, I guess, we could give you to making the overall deal work. And you've got to sort of know who you're buying from to do that. So ask the right questions.
Yep, definitely. There we go, guys. Hopefully some good little tips for you. Good luck with your property purchase. We're here if you need us.
Thank you. See ya.